Hello and welcome. I'm Gila Ross. I'm host of the Power Up podcast, and here in the UK, we've just gone into our third lockdown. So many things are closed. Even our schools are closed, and not just that, but it's so cold out that we're feeling the stress and the strain. Can we even use this time to strengthen our relationships? This is something that we looked at, we discussed with our Wednesday night group, and we came up with such a powerful idea that I wanted to share with you. So I've got a question for you all. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is just for technical reasons, I'm going to mute all of you, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to hear from you. It just means the sound quality works better. So when I'm going to ask questions, or if you have questions, unmute yourself and chime in, because I'd like to make this as interactive. Here's the thing. I spend all day talking to myself, i.e. parenting. This is my chance to actually interact with people. All right. So, okay. So my question to you all is, and I think this is something that maybe we can sort of relate to, especially nowadays, right? On the one hand, we're in lockdown, and it's so easy, I think, to get wrapped up into our own little world, regardless of whether it's the people that we're living with, right? Sometimes they can get on our nerves a little bit more than usual. Just me? Just me? No, okay, just me. No, there are some people that can relate to us, which, by the way, is not that they're getting on our nerves more than usual, but it's just that we're together more than usual, right? So that's going to go, the joys is hopefully a little bit more than usual, but the getting on the nerves may be a little bit more than usual as well. But I think also the people that we don't see on a regular basis, right? It could be very hard sometimes to maintain relationships and to even strengthen relationships with others. So how do we strengthen relationships? I want to start. I'm gonna open up to discussion soon, but before we open it to discussion, I want to share a little tidbit, and so that so a little story from this week's parasha, and that we can hopefully get us thinking and started. So if you give me a moment while I share a screen. Okay, wait a second. Sorry, bear with me a moment, please. Okay, this is what I need to do. Whoops, wrong one. Sorry. Okay, so to give you a little bit of background of the story, in this week's Torah portion, we are told about the story about Moses. And what happened is that Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace, right? He grew up in the lap of luxury, literally. He was a Jew, and the Jews were suffering terribly, but he was growing up in the king's palace. And what we're told is, does anyone want to read number 11, verse 11? You can all see the screen, right? Anyone want to read 11?
I don't mind.
Okay, great. Rachel, thank you.
In Hebrew or English?
You could just do the English.
Okay, sometime after that, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his kinsfolk and witnessed their labors. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen.
All right, so this is where the story starts, right? That Moses goes out. Now, what's fascinating about it, I'm going to share with you what Rashi says on it. So Rashi is one of the foremost commentators on the thing, and he gives us a lot of perspective on what's really going on in the story. So does anyone want to read the one that says number 2? Anyone?
I will.
Thanks, Nikki.
And he saw their burdens. He set his eyes and mind to share in their distress.
Right. So basically what Rashi is commenting here is that the word that the Torah uses is quite an interesting word. It's saying that he went out to see what was happening, to see it. And he says that Rashi says that they are specifically, he set his eye and mind on it, right? Like he really went and out to see what was going on and to think about what his brothers were going through. So what Rashi is giving us a little bit of a hint here is that when we see other people, when we see other people, that kind of helps us feel for another, which leads us into, I think, talking about sympathy and empathy. Who wants to tell me, describe what's the difference between what is sympathy, what is empathy? Anyone want to share a viewpoint? What is sympathy and what is empathy?
I think sympathy, empathy is if like you feel for somebody, you're not in the same situation, but you sort of you're compassionate and you can understand how you feel. And I think sympathy is if you're feeling sorry for someone about something, if someone's lost a loved one, you feel sympathy for them.
Okay.
And yeah, I think empathy is like when you've actually been through pretty much a similar situation, so you can actually really understand. Whereas sympathizing, I think it's more you can imagine their pain, but you don't really know, so you just feel bad for them because you can kind of understand that it's probably a hard time, but you don't know for sure. Where with empathy, it's more like you really know what they're going through in a way because you might have gone through something very similar.
Okay, I hear that. Anyone else wants to share anything on that? Anyone?
I wonder if empathy is more of a feeling and sympathy is more of like an intellectual idea of something. Like you have sympathy if you know that something's, sorry, I'm not putting this very articulately, but if you know that something that someone's gone through is bad and you can be sympathetic. And that can also be with your actions, but then empathy is when you really feel, I don't know, feel the pain with them, I guess. No, I'm not putting it very well. I don't know if that made any sense whatsoever.
I like what you're saying, especially the fact that and I think it's a little bit of what Beth said, a little bit of what Lisa said as well, is that empathy, and I think you put it very articulately when you say, when you feel the pain with them, right? And perhaps it would be fair, Charlotte, did you want to say something? Oh, okay. So perhaps I think a good description or a good definition of both of them is sympathy is when you kind of feel sorry for someone, you feel for someone, whereas empathy is kind of when you feel with someone, right? And Nicola is saying that you agree with empathy. Now, Lisa mentioned, and I want to throw this out as a question to the group, is Lisa mentioned that empathy is when you have been through a similar situation and you can kind of understand what they're going through. Is it possible for a person to have empathy for someone else that has not been through the same situation? Did I make the question clear? Just ask it another way, right? I think most of us, and you can show, would I be right in making an assumption that empathy is better than sympathy? If you're going through something, yes, you want some, yes. Nicola's saying yes. Anyone else? Yes, thumbs up. You just, yes, right. So we're making the assumption, number one, that empathy is better than sympathy. Totally better than sympathy. Thank you, Nicola. And Lisa has suggested that in order to really be empathetic with someone else, you have to have gone through something similar or the same sort of thing for themselves. is that now, I'm obviously, if someone's been through something similar, you know, you connect with someone, right? Like if God forbid you lose someone and then you meet someone else that has also lost, you know, a relative, there's a connection, right? But what my question is it possible for a person to have empathy for someone else without having going through that situation?
Yes, I think it is, Gila, because a lot of the people I deal with in work, some of them, you know, with support needs, you know, they have such difficulties, some of the people that I help. And, you know, I'll often say to them, you know, I really empathise with you. You know, I totally feel this way if this was happening to me. And I don't put it in a patronising way, but yeah, I do believe you can feel empathy without experiencing it yourself, because it's showing that you can relate to them and you understand why they're feeling that way.
Okay.
It's interesting though, because I feel differently. I feel with sympathy, I feel like you can have different levels of sympathy. So you can have the sort of basic level of you feel bad for someone, but you can feel real deep sympathy at the further spectrum, because you can really kind of comprehend how, say for example, if you've not lost a parent but someone's lost one, you can probably imagine how painful that is, and you can really feel like so bad for them, so sorry for them, and you want to help them in any way you can. But I think to really empathize and relate to them, like I can't see how you could possibly understand what it's like without, God forbid, losing someone close to you and really knowing what that kind of pain is like.
Yeah, but it might be different pain. I can't believe you can imagine what it's like to lose a parent if you haven't lost one. You can understand they're going through pain, 100%. But you can't imagine.
That's why I feel like you can't possibly empathize if you've not gone through it. That's why I feel like you can only sympathize to a deeper level.
You could have sympathy for them, but you wouldn't be able to empathize with them. So I'm totally agreeing with Lisa.
Any other thoughts? Whatever. I think this is a very interesting discussion. So I'd love to hear your thoughts before I.
Sure.
I just was like looking at the definition of it just to see what it says.
Okay, thanks, Tash.
Can I say it? Yeah. No, and it says when you're being empathetic, you are doing more than feeling sorry for another person. You are actually trying to imagine the situation from that person's point of view. So trying to imagine, trying to put yourself in their shoes, I think is being empathetic. From this thing.
Yes. What was that? What was that you used to cheat on? I'm just
feels like Countdown with Dictionary Corner.
I'm sorry I cheated, but I was just interested.
Well, as I said to a certain child of mine today, at least you were honest, right? So at least you were honest.
There we go.
There's no cheating, and I think you're right. And I wanna just say something. I know there's a lot of a strong feeling, and I hear it. I hear the strong feeling about that. There's a feeling that you can't understand what someone else has gone through unless you've gone through something similar. But one could argue, and I'm just going to play devil's advocate over here, is that you've never gone through something similar, right? Even if you choose the situation, if you look at a situation of, God forbid, losing a parent, right? Everyone has a different relationship with a parent. Everyone's circumstances of how they lost their parents is different, right? It affects everyone different. Like, you'll never have two people going through the exact same situation. In fact, and this is off on a tangent, but you'll forgive me because I plied you with alcohol and chocolate so I can get away with it tonight, is that Pirkei Avos tells us, do not judge another person until you walk in their shoes, right? Which literally means don't judge other people, because you never know what someone else is going through, right? Like you may have two people that go through on the outside something very similar, but it's different because every person, it affects them different. Their personality is different. The situation's different, right? Which I think then sort of maybe if we're saying that you can't empathize with someone else unless you've actually been through what they've been through, maybe we're actually saying you can never empathize with someone else.
I feel like that's the problem these days, that everyone is too quick to judge, unfortunately. Do you know what I mean? You judge people without even like realizing you're doing it.
I know it's.
I don't mean to sound horrible.
No, it's yes, same storm, different vessel. I mean that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time about you know, judging others. Interestingly enough, the podcast that I just put up, not the parenting one, but the one I put up on Tuesday, we spoke about that one a little bit, about how you can't judge other people. And it's very, very true. But to get back to what we were saying, I think let's look at what the mitzvah is, okay? Because I think it's very interesting, because we have an understanding in Judaism that God only gives us mitzvahs that we can actually fulfill, right? Doesn't mean it's easy. No one ever said that it's going to be easy, but it's possible. So what is the mitzvah in because there's actually a mitzvah in Judaism. I don't know if anyone here knew that beforehand, but there actually is a mitzvah in Judaism related to it. And the Hebrew words, and I'm going to say the Hebrew because I think the Hebrew conveys to us the depth of it. And so it says, it's noseh ba'al im chavera, which if you translate it literally, it means to carry the burden with the friend, with the person, right? So the mitzvah in Judaism is not to have sympathy. One could even argue is that it is beyond empathy, right? But it is literally to carry the pain with another person, right? To be with them in that situation, to carry it together with them. So that's a tall order, right? That's a tall order. Am I right in saying that that's a tall order? Yes? Yes, it is a tall order. So how on earth do we do this? Any thoughts on how on earth we can do this?
I think in some ways, you can think about your kids, obviously that's not talking about that anybody, that's just your children, but if your kids feel pain or if someone's been horrible to them and they're upset about it, I mean, you definitely carry that, I think, but obviously that's your kids, but I think that's kind of an example of how you do it, maybe.
But I think you brought up a brilliant example, because sometimes we do it with our kids, sometimes we don't, right? Like sometimes our kids tell us, or remember the days when they had school and they came home and they said, someone was mean to me, and you kind of feel it, right? Who was that child that said something not nice to my child or was mean to my child? You feel their pain, right? And yet there are other times when we don't feel their pain, right? When your child says, I don't want to do the work, right? We don't necessarily, our instinctive reaction isn't like, I feel your pain in doing this, right? So how do we get to that place? How do we get from because we can, right? And I think what you're saying, Tash, is very powerful, and is a little bit of a hint, right? Because sometimes when a child of ours is hurt in a certain way, we can empathize with them, we can carry their pain, even though we haven't experienced it, right? So, but how do we get there?
And also I think sometimes we can carry their pain like long after they've forgotten about it as well.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Do we get there by talking to them about it, like saying, well, how does it make you feel, and how, what do you want to happen next time? And you just like try and get them to talk about it to get their emotion out so you can feel it, and then you can try and help them move on from it.
It's definitely yes. I would definitely say yes, that is a valid point. Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
I do think if you're actually that close to somebody, as in your kids or a really good friend, you do feel their pain anyway.
I think sometimes, I mean, it depends what the behavior though is, and I think it's a good example to use our kids, because like sometimes the behavior is really annoying, right? And that can overcome that I'm just thinking of an example, right? I happen not to be a morning person. Like it's really a struggle for me to get out of bed in the morning. I'm not a morning person. Hashem, God has a sense of humor because he blessed me with kids that are morning people, all of them, except the older ones, right? Now, my teenager is a teenager and he likes to sleep in, right? And then when I would have to wake him up for school, even now he's on Zoom lessons or whatever, I have to get him out of bed. My initial reaction is, even though I should be able to understand because I experience it every single morning, my initial reaction is not, oh, I really feel it's so hard for you to get out of bed. My initial reaction is, why do I have to fight you to get out of bed, right? So do you hear what I'm saying, Sharon?
Yeah, but that's a bit different, because I think if your kids or your close friends feel pain, then or upset, then you're upset too, and you feel you feel awful for their pain. I think getting them out of bed is a little bit different, because you know he needs to be out of bed.
Yes, although I think if I empathize with him, right? If I carried his pain, the way I woke him up, the way I would wake him up every morning would be a little bit different, right? Then
I wouldn't get him out of bed though. That's the same with my two. Rihanna doesn't get out of bed, and Rafi's up at the crack of dawn. If I empathize with her, she just would never get out of bed.
Interestingly enough, and I'm gonna give you a little snippet, because I think Sharon raised a very good point, because a lot of times we think about empathy and we think about the big things, right? You know, when a kid comes home crying, or God forbid there's a tragedy, or you know, someone's going through a life change, or something big is happening. But the truth is, we have hundreds and thousands of opportunities a day for empathy, and perhaps these little opportunities impact our relationships more. And what's interesting is, if you look into the story of Moses, when was he chosen to be a leader? Anyone knows when he was chosen to be a leader? At what point? It's Jewish trivia. Are you smarter than your 5th grader?
Probably when he was born. His path was probably already decided for him.
Okay. But what was the moment when he was given that mission?
Was it when he was in the field?
Sorry?
When he was in the field and the bush was burning, the tree?
Yeah. Yes, what was the story behind it? The story that happened just before is that Moses was a shepherd. And what happened is, one day there was a little one of the sheep that wandered off. The shepherd, he's got loads of sheep to worry about, and this one little sheep wanders off, and he goes and he looks after it, and he sees that the sheep stops and takes a drink. And what is Moses' reaction? Moses' reaction is he empathizes with this little sheep that is thirsty, and he carries it back, right? He thinks, oh, wow, you must be so thirsty. Let me help you. And at that point, he's chosen to be a leader. Why? What do he care? I mean, you know, it's great. He's a shepherd, you know, bring him back. Why is that greatness? Why is that small little thing? Because that sometimes the small, there's a pattern in Judaism, is that people are always tested, our leaders are always tested with small things first. Why? Because the small things are the test of our character, right? If you, Moses, show such care and concern about a stray sheep, you are fitting to be the leader of the Jewish people, because I know God says you are fitting to be the leader of the Jewish people, because I know you're going to care about every one of the Jewish people. So sometimes that's those small actions really speak to our character as much. So how on earth do we get to this? So Rav Dessler writes, and he explains. He says sometimes you see an artist, right? And they're able to draw and paint an image of something that they have never experienced, right? For example, you can have an artist, a male artist, who paints a picture of a mother and a child, and you can look at it and you can feel the emotions. How are they able to do that? So he says the way that a person's able to do that is because the artist first paints a picture in their mind. And once they have that picture in their mind, then they paint it. What does it mean for us? It means that just like Moses, what did he do? He went and he saw to visualize what was going on and then put it into our mind. Is that in our relationships, before we step into an interpersonal relationship, and it could be something like, God forbid, having to make a shiva call, or it could be something about calling someone to congratulate them on something, right? Whether it's sharing in their pain or sharing in their joy, or even a small interaction, right? Whereas where you're going to interact with a spouse or a child, or you know, and it's something that you're initially going to react negatively, first take a moment to visualize what the other person is going through, right? Take 60 seconds before you make that phone call, right? Or before you respond to a child, take 60 seconds to visualize what is that person going through. And once you've painted a picture in your mind, the way you relate to that other person is going to be totally different. So I'll share with you a story. I'll share with you a story of how of what this means. There was a rabbi that was called the Satmar Rebbe, right? Hold on a second. We'll let Gemma back in. So there was this rabbi that was called the Satmar Rebbe, and he was a very, very, let me tell you the story and then you can make up your minds about what type of person he was, okay? So one day there was a widower, someone that he knew who unfortunately had lost their spouse, and they were marrying off their child. So the widower came to the rabbi and he said to him, I'd like to invite you to come to the chuppah, the wedding of my child. And the Satmar Rebbe, he said to him, I can't come to the chuppah, but listen, when the wedding is over, come to my house and I'll wish you a mazel tov then. So the wedding went late. It was a big wedding, and it finished very late. And the man goes to the rabbi's house, and he doesn't know, do I knock on? Do I not knock on? It's so late. But he sees that the Satmar Rabbi is waiting for him. And the Satmar Rabbi calls him in, he makes him a cup of tea, and he starts asking him, so how was the chuppah? Who was the rabbi? How was this? How was that? How was the other? And he sits with him for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, just discussing the wedding. And the man leaves, and the gabbai, the helper of the Satmar Rabbi, said to him, Rabbi, why did you do that? You could have saved yourself so much time had you popped into the chuppah and wished him mazel tov there, you know, wished him the 5 minutes, taking 5 minutes out of your day to go over to him, wish him mazel tov at the chuppah. Why did you do this? So listen to his answer. He listened to his answer. He says, this guy is a widower. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a spouse. What does he need? What's part of the joy of making a celebration, right, is dissecting it afterwards, right? Talking about it afterwards, talking about how it went. Now, this guy is going to go home and he's got no one to do that with, right? So that's why I told him to come to me, because what does it mean? It's amazing. It's amazing, right? If you think about it, because who would think about something like that? But how does a person get to that sort of level of empathy? It's because he stopped and he thought, right? And he imagined, what's it like in that person's worldview, right? What is it like in that person's worldview? And he understood he's going to come home and he's going to have no one to talk to. So that's how I can share and carry his pain a little bit. And I think if we bring it back to our own lives, right, in our own relationships, it doesn't have to take a lot of time. It's a habit that we get into, right? Before we respond, right? Whether it's a child that's kicking off and saying, I don't want to do X, Y, Z. Before we respond and say, you got to do it or whatever, we stop, we think, what's going on here, right? With a spouse as well, the same thing, right? You know, sometimes we get into, and I think a lot of times this happens, right? We get into a disagreement or whatever, and we both dig our heels in instead of stopping and thinking, what's going on in the other person's mind, right? What's going on? And I think also, and I know Yael mentioned about judging, and again, it's a topic for another thing, so I'm not going to go into it. But I think, look, we all understand we're going through tough times nowadays, and I think one of the sad things that is happening nowadays is that people are very quick to judge other people, right? Everyone has different opinions, and everyone and it's sad. I think it's very sad, right? Instead of doing that, let's stop and think, what is going through in their worldview, right? What is that other person going through, right? And, you know, if someone texts you something or whatever, and we're so quick to text back, or we're so quick to listen to the news while we're drinking a coffee or while we're whatever, and we don't even like stop and think. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it's a question of stopping, thinking, and painting a picture of what's happening in the other person's worldview. And then I think once we have that, once we've stopped and we've thought and we've painted that picture in our mind, then I think we can fulfill this mitzvah that the Torah asks of us, is to carry the pain of another person. And it doesn't just have to be for the pain, it can also be for the joy of another person. But right to, you know, sometimes that's also a difficulty, right? Like if someone tells you that they're having something joyous going on, to really feel happy for someone else's success, that can also be a challenge, right? But when we stop and we think and we paint a picture out of our mind of what the other person's going through, I think that helps us fulfill the mitzvah of Noseh B'Ol Im Chavero, to really carry the pain and the joy of another person. Any thoughts? Any comments?
Gila, I just can't understand that. I can't understand, if you haven't experienced what someone else has actually gone through, how you can fully understand what they are going through. And as you said, it will be completely different. Like, you know, Nissim his dad was like everything to him, whereas I'm not that close to my dad. So I can't for the life of me understand how. Obviously I feel bad and I feel extremely sorry for him and whatever, but can I feel his pain? No.
So I'm going to throw the question out to the group, because I think it's a good question. I'm going to throw it out to the group before I weigh in.
I'm saying if your circumstances are completely different, obviously you feel bad for them. You want to, you wish you could make it better for them, and you'll support them and you'll be there. But how can you feel that pain if you know?
So interestingly enough, it's the words, and I don't know if this means anything, whatever. Again, I'd love to hear what everyone else says. The words is to carry the pain with them.
I think also when
Yes.
you seeing someone you love in pain, I don't think it actually matters necessarily what it is. If you've had, you know, if you've gone through the same thing, I think actually seeing them hurt so much is so hard to watch, and to spend time with someone who's in so much pain, whatever it might be, whether it's loss of someone, loss of a job, or depression, or whatever it could be, to witness someone you care for so deeply, whether it be a friend, spouse, child, to be around people who are suffering so much, people you care for, it's so hard. And I actually, talking about empathy, I remember once seeing on Facebook one of these little videos that was going around of, like, it was like a little bubble white figure, and it was showing as every time it came to someone who was slumped over, and a black figure, and every time it went to the next one, it took the black off that person and it left them white, as if they were like helping them, and it went on to the next one, they took a bit more of their black and helped them, and then by the end of it they were fully covered in black, to show that sometimes when you're carrying other people's pain, it can actually like bring you down too. So I guess it's also something to like be mindful of as well.
Really nice. That's
Yeah, so like it is sometimes like you can be weighed down by watching people you care for. So I guess that's also something if you're an empath type of person, you've also got, I guess in a way, also got to be mindful that you don't overbear yourself with other people's pain. It's kind of that really hard balance. It's very, very, I think it's a really hard, challenging thing sometimes when you're in a relationship. Yeah.
And anyone else wants to weigh in on this?
Is some of it what you do with it? Like you can't feel someone's pain, but you can feel pain with someone. And then, I don't know, I guess you can be weighed down by it. Or like the rabbi did, he kind of used that understanding of not necessarily feeling what they were going through, but like feeling that they were going through something and what they might need, and then use that to do something that helps them subtly. And I don't know if that will bring you down in quite the same way as, like, I don't know. I'm not managing to finish any thoughts today.
I think you're raising a very, very good point, that without thinking of the other person, right? Like, let's go back to that story, right? Had he not stopped and thought and imagined what's it like to marry off a child while having while having no spouse, right? He may just have said, yes, I'll come to the chuppah. But because he stopped and he thought about it and he imagined what it's like to go through the thing and then to come home to an empty house, he was able to help out in a much more profound way. Now, I want to say, Lisa brings up a good point about when you're living with someone and they're in pain, that brings up the whole other pain. But and Yael is also you're raising yes, I think Yael is also raising a point. But when we stop, right? Let me give you two examples, right? Let's say you have two couples, right? Both of them have a spouse that is in, that has lost a parent. And one of them, let's call the couple A, right? So couple A, the wife doesn't think about it, right? And life goes on. And couple B, the wife thinks to herself, like, she takes whatever 60 seconds just to think, what must it feel like to have to keep going with normal life when everything has been ripped away from you, right? It's a different way of relating. It's a different way of relating. Does it mean that we have to know exactly what they're going? Perhaps it's not important to know exactly what they're going, but to stop and to think, what is it like to be this, right? What is it like to be in this situation? Someone wanted to weigh in and say something? Anyone? And I do also want to say that I think it's a very, very powerful tool in the small interactions we have with other people, right? Like even something simple as, like, when you ask your child to do something, right? Like you ask your kid to clean up their room. Sometimes you ask a child to clean up their room and they just don't do it, and you like, it's frustrating. But if you stop and you think, 1 minute, my child is 3, and I've asked, like, what does it feel like to be 3 and in a messy room and being asked to clean up my room? It may feel very overwhelming, right? And you may realize, oh, okay, so I'll tell the child, pick up, the magnet tiles, right? And again, it's a small, it may sound like a small thing, but it makes a huge impact on our relationships when we stop and we think, what is it like to be XYZ, right? What is it like to try and sort of paint a picture of what the other person is going through, and not just in the big things, right? Obviously in the big things, and sometimes the big things can feel much more overwhelming, but also in the small things.
Thank you for spending your time and listening to this podcast. Was it helpful? I'd love to hear from you. You can contact me on Instagram at Gila Ross, or you can get in touch via WhatsApp. And if you benefited from this in any way, please share the word and leave us a rating or a review, and subscribe for future episodes. Thank you again for spending your time with the Power Up podcast, and have a great day.